driving out Highway 40, right on into Steamboat Springs, where living life is easy and a man can fulfill his dreams. Through the mountains and valleys, right on up to Fish Creek Falls, now Yampa Valley will greet you to share it all. Oh, Yampa Valley, you've got a hold on me. Oh, Yampa Valley, you've mesmerized me.
In the spring of 2000, the small cow town turned international ski resort of Steamboat Springs in northwest Colorado had big plans to celebrate both the millennium and its own centennial. A committee had formed the year before and did what had to be done: cross their fingers and get creative. First came a well-edited coffee table book. An old one-room schoolhouse got restored.
Names that still exist in our community: Kemry, Arnold, Werner, Brenner, Bogue, Rourks, Willett Stanko, Selvig, Lufkin, Barber. Those are names that have built foundations, and those people graduated from this school.
An original centennial song debuted during the 4th of July weekend.
I hear the tread of pioneers, a patience yet to lead. The first slow wash of waves, where soon will roll a human sea.
Extra fireworks were exploded that night. They drove cattle down Lincoln Avenue for the first time in 30 years. The Tread of Pioneers Museum sponsored a street fair. The Arts Council fielded a cast of thousands to perform an original musical pageant. It turned out to be its own history maker. Other folks got together to reach out to the valley's original residents.
To hear that Steamboat would like to welcome us back with open arms, but they just want us to know we're welcome. It's a good thought, you know, but I wish you'd give us our land back and move out. Just kidding.
Oh, Yampa Valley, you've got a hold on me. Oh, Yampa Valley, you've mesmerized me. You've got a hold on me. You've got a hold on me. You've got a hold on me.
We call them Utes. They call themselves Nooch, meaning the people. They came here for the many sacred springs, but a simple plant would give the people their true identity.
But we say, Yampa Ikya, Yamp. Yamp is a root, means white root. Yamp Ikya means eat, means white root eaters.
What we now call the White River, the original Yampatka. They're Yampatka. The Yampa eaters came from this area. Eventually they changed their band name into White River because of their agency, which was located on the White River in Meeker. So they begin to use that name, and they've been using that ever since.
Humans have been coming to the Yampa Valley for at least 10,000 years. Utes were the most feared and respected of the mountain tribes. Their skills as horsemen and warriors have placed them among the finest cavalry and horse soldiers in the world. As late as 1873, the Utes still retained most of western Colorado through shrewd treaty negotiations. Gold was discovered at Hans Peak. Gold fever possessed even sane men. Treaties were ignored. Ute hunting parties tangled with the miners and people got killed. James Harvey Crawford, a young Civil War veteran, arrived in the Colorado Territory by covered wagon from Missouri with his wife Maggie and their children. He was headed into the heart of Ute country. That first summer in 1875, others weren't far behind. There were 5 white families and 100 Ute families sharing the valley of the Medicine Springs.
Even Crawford, Logan Crawford, when he talks about being with the Indians and having Indian friends and so on at the steamboat, that's nonsense. They did not have an animosity and the fear and everything else that whites had towards Indians and Indians had towards whites at this last few years, and all of the Indian wars that were going on every place else did not allow for that kind of a friendship. It just simply, it didn't happen. But we like to remember that. And it's nice to remember, and it's nice to know those things, you see.
Denver newspapers fueled the fear and hatred because the Utes were still around. In 1881, the White River Utes were forcibly marched to the Uinta Reservation in eastern Utah. With the Utes out of the picture, Crawford, along with Boulder banking friends, formed a private town company. Shares of stock were issued and sold out in a hurry. Yet, creating a town out of the wilderness was not for the faint-hearted.
Mrs. and Mr. Crawford were extremely interesting people and amazing people. I don't even know if we have anybody here in this community now who would come near them as far as their desires and their farsightedness. First thing they did, of course, they built this little cabin. And if anybody came along, you know, the trappers or anybody, they would invite them in. Mrs. Crawford started the first church, and then she started several other churches. They had the church in the little schoolhouse. And she started the first library. She started the first school, and they built a little one-room cabin and brought a teacher in, and the children from around went to this little school. And I think those things are the basis for all of our culture here in Steamboat. Mr. Crawford started the first newspaper. He brought the first press in. He brought the first printer in.
Mr. Hoyle, who was James Hoyle, he was from Boulder, he started the newspaper, and they gave him the lot where the actually is called Lincoln Avenue Printers now. And my granddad, he was the editor of the paper. He bought the paper in 1896 for $100, and that was his true love, and he was known as being one of the great editorial writers of that time.
The Utes had neglected to mention the existence of a hot spring to the Crawfords. Once found, it became a focal point for the new town. Crawford built a small log building over the spring for privacy. The bathhouse spring became Steamboat's first official tourist attraction. The Sheraton became the first commercial hotel in town. Before that, you slept on the ground or had to know somebody that'd take you in. To make ends meet, the young Crawford boys began guiding hunting trips into the surrounding mountains.
Especially little boys, but little girls grow up too with a fantasy of cowboys and Indians and Matt Dillon and Gunsmoke and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and that's here. We're talking Steamboat Springs here. This is the real West.
Spanish-American War ended. Well, they had a big celebration down there and set off a lot of dynamite and made a big ruckus, and the ranchers up the valley heard it, and they went and got their horses and their guns and went to fight Indians, and they told the women to all go and hide. And this Mrs. Walker, she said, well, I'll just take this old cowbell and go down the Willard, and if they hear me, they'll just think I'm an old cow. But
Mrs. Crawford was a teetotaler. Rebel rousers and blackguards crossed the river into Brooklyn to drink in the saloons and acquaint themselves with the ladies of the night.
You didn't dare go over there, you know. You was no good if you was fooling around over Brooklyn. Some of those young guys used to go over there, I guess, play around those gals, but I never did. I never went over there.
With the exception of Brooklyn, Steamboat was considered quite an up-and-coming community at the turn of the century.
Music underneath the stars and friends around the fire.
In only 25 years, the remote little frontier settlement of Steamboat Springs had grown from 5 white families to almost 100. The Utes were long gone, and the days of cowboys and Indians had passed.
Stars and friends around the fire.
Big changes were coming to town, but to get here, they'd still have to ride the stagecoach.
Smedley had not come in this year of 1900 to enjoy the magnificent views along the stage route. He had come seeking a franchise to offer light to all the town's residents, and he meant to achieve results. Smedley made it clear that he could not be granted a franchise by any other than a duly elected board of an incorporated town. But Steamboat Springs presented a basic problem. It was not incorporated.
These are the minutes from the first meeting of the trustees of the town of Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and they're from the mayor's office. The meeting was called to order with the mayor in the chair and all present.
On August 15th, the 7 members of the first Steamboat Springs Board of Trustees were duly sworn into office. One of the first items of business, to no one's surprise, was the question of Smedley's franchise request. No official action was taken as an ordinance had to be drawn and discussed.
And a decision that their next meeting would be held on September 22nd, 1900 at 8:30 p.m. Adjournment was declared by James H. Crawford, mayor.
Jim Stanko, local rancher and historian, describes the town's first boom.
But I think what changed the town around the turn of the century and made it start to boom and bustle was the fact that by that time the surveys were being completed. A version of the Homestead Act was enacted by Congress, which opened up most of northwestern Colorado homesteading. That's the year from about 1902 to about 1910. That's when the biggest portion of the homesteads were filed in Routt County. And then, of course, with the homesteaders, then you need the stores. So that's when you see the Hugus market coming in, the harness shops. You start seeing the board sidewalks. And
my grandfather was F.M. Light. He was married to Carrie Light, and they came from Ohio in 1905. And he had in mind that he would start a clothing store in Steamboat Springs.
Uncle Sam would play a role in shaping the future of the town and the surrounding valley. Teddy Roosevelt had hunted in the flat tops in California Park. When he became president, he and others created the U.S. Forest Service, setting aside millions of acres of western land. Timber production in the Park Range Forest Reserve, later renamed the Routt National Forest, helped supplement Steamboat's economy with jobs that paid real money. The first contract was awarded for telephone poles. Telephones became an instant lifeline for people living out on remote ranches. As it was not on the way to anywhere else, modern modes of transportation had bypassed the Yampa Valley. That all changed when an aging businessman gambled his entire fortune to build a railroad from Denver through the heart of Colorado's mountains to Salt Lake City.
He built that railroad more for the coal fields than anything, although the railroad, though, also then spurred a lot of the agricultural, because when we did the research on the book on the county fair, we find that the railroad is, they're the ones that are bringing in cattle to give to the kids to start 4-H, because they know if they can get the kids to raising cows, then mom and dad will raise cow, and then they put those cows on the railroad and send them out.
the Steamboat Springs Depot was the largest cattle shipping point in the West.
Well, it went over the divide then. There was no Moffat Tunnel. And every now and then in those snow sheds, sparks would fly, and so would the snow sheds. They catch on fire. And you could be marooned up there for a couple of days.
New buildings were going up all over town. A spacious bathhouse to enhance the hot springs, and the cabin hotel to accommodate train passengers and tourists. A few automobiles had been dragged to town by 1902. The first to arrive under its own power would have to wait a decade for a road over Rabbit Ears Pass. In order to fill 100 new steam-heated rooms at the Cabin Hotel, the Commerce Club was convinced that the town's 150 mineral springs held the key to future development.
The spring waters were not just for bathing, they also have a lot of health properties. One of the early 1911 promotional brochures, and this was a promotion to get funding for a sanitarium. And this 1911 brochure reads, the waters of Steamboat are recommended for catarrh, rheumatism, eczema, anemia, and all forms of stomach, blood, kidney, and bladder troubles. So if you can't find what ails you there.
In an unusual pairing of talents, the daughter of a coal baron and a dancer from back east decided to start a Western camp for girls.
Perry Mansfield Camp was two women. One of them was Portia Mansfield. She was the dancer, and Charlotte Perry was the artistic one, and she was the one that put on the plays, which were marvelous.
Meanwhile, Charlotte's sister Marjorie had met a champion Norwegian ski jumper at the Winter Carnival in Hot Sulphur Springs.
And Marjorie Perry was here, and her sister, and John Parr, he had a regular bobsled. He called it the La Pansy. And Marjorie took Halston down Steamboat.
The winter was a kind of a sleeping time here in Yampa Valley, but to the skiing it became alive.
The town came alive, all right, when Howelson organized the first winter carnival on Woodchuck Hill, across from the train depot in February of 1914. Nearly 2,000 spectators saddled horses, hitched up teams, and showed up. They were not disappointed.
And we didn't go to town very often, but my folks took us to the second ski carnival that was held in Steamboat Springs, and it was up on Woodchuck Hill, where the college is.
Scandinavian jumpers had come to amaze the crowd, and a dozen steamboat boys terrified their mothers trying to do the same thing. The affair was a grand success.
Several years after we'd been in Steamboat, we moved to Strawberry Park, and our house was right next door to Carl's. Carl Howelson, he was a professional skier. He had skied in a circus. So we thought Carl Howelson was very entertaining. Oh, he was chasing his pigs, and we were chasing our lambs. So we had quite a bit in common, I can tell you.
Howelson's skill and enthusiasm for the sport inspired kids and adults all over Colorado to strap on skis.
Carl Howelson used to say, "Hit the point, Lou. Hit the point, Louie." So that's what he meant, right at the end, see. Yeah, he was a good instructor. He wasn't an instructor, he wasn't paid for it, but he just helping the kids out, you know.
He also introduced the Scandinavian sport of ski-yoring. Winter Carnival became marching bands, parades, street events, races. It was the biggest deal of winter.
Steamboat just went around carnivals. Our winters were completely around carnivals because there was no business in town. People from the ranches would come in and buy a little bit of groceries and all, but there was nothing to do. Then when all of these people came in, the carnival, of course, it pepped up everybody. The restaurants were busy and everybody was busy.
Underneath the takeoff every Sunday morn, there comes a bunch of jolly skiers to jump and show their form. Oh, the big and small, the small and big, they all come dressed in the skier's rig. They jump into the blue, and when they all get through, the president pulls a string and they drop their skis and sing.
In the summer of 1915, the Steamboat Springs Winter Sports Club was formed. It was the first nationally recognized ski club west of the Mississippi. Carl Howelson knew that he was going to need a first-rate, permanent jumping hill then, and he took a liking to the steep hill across the river. On a Saturday in February 1915, the gates of the refuge were opened for horses and sleds as a huge crowd gathered for the first day of the tournament on the Norwegians' new ski jump.
Kids began building ski jumps all over town, prompting civic leaders to raise funds for the establishment of a hospital. Steamboat's most admired country doctor, Frederick E. Willett, established the first permanent hospital and spent the next 56 years taking care of injured skiers, sick folks, and the like. Natalie Willett-Stanko remembers her uncle, Doc Willett.
He used to see patients out in the country, and he made house calls. And during the flu epidemic, he made a bed in the wintertime in the sled and hired a driver and drove from ranch to ranch and took care of the people that were critically ill and slept between ranches because he had a driver.
Doc Willett also delivered most of the town's new babies.
But my youngest child was the last baby that Dr. Willett delivered.
When Carl Howelson came to Steamboat Springs, the town boasted 1,500 residents. Farms in Strawberry Park sold for $1,000 per acre. The area was producing over 6,000 crates of strawberries annually. Following the state legislature's division of Routt County into two counties, Routt and Moffat, an election was held and the Routt County seat in Hans Peak was moved again, this time to Steamboat Springs. Inductees were sent to help fight the First World War in Europe. Steamboat Springs' native sons still had moms and dads, aunts and uncles living overseas, and the fight for world freedom became a personal one. It began with violent labor strikes in the coal mines, a deadly flu epidemic, the brutal winter of 1920, Prohibition, and it crashed with the stock market in 29. Die-hard cattle ranchers took up sheep after their herds were frozen to death. Some even tried their hand at raising lettuce.
So I worked in lettuce fields, and we planted little pieces of lettuce there at Deponis, and they found out that they could get lettuce cheaper from California. Nobody ever got very, very rich raising lettuce.
The turmoil of labor strikes in the coal mines resulted in the formation of several chapters of the Ku Klux Klan in Routt County.
Well, Routt County became, in the mid-1920s, a center for the Ku Klux Klan. Steamboat was a big center for the Klan, as was Craig. They were very much concerned about the welfare of the nation, and they thought that we were losing what was truly American, you see. They were scared of the future.
In 1922, Steamboat Springs did put in a city ordinance that prohibited any parades in Steamboat Springs where people were masked. They couldn't be masked if you had to be in a parade.
There were tools, and this is where the source of the bitterness is at. The people that came to the United States, that is from Southern Europe, Italians, Greeks, they came to the United States and they had a long history of fighting for democracy. The 19th century was a century of democratic revolutions, and they had fought and bled for it. When they got here, they expected to have democracy and to be treated with respect.
That didn't stop folks born of hard times from gathering in their one-room schools to dance and socialize.
I went to Sydney's schoolhouse one night to a party, and I skied down there all by myself. It was 5 miles, and we used to have a literary, and everybody was supposed to do something. And then after they had the programs, why, then they always danced. So afterwards, why, he wouldn't ask me to dance, so I asked him to dance. And so that's how I met Pop. We just got together finally.
Hard times didn't stop cowboys from putting on bucking competitions at Howelson Hill. The horses acquired a greater reputation than the cowboys who rode them.
Doc Marshall was a bronc rider. He rode Pershing with a $50 in each saddle stirrup, and they never lost either one of them. And Pershing was a bucking horse.
Horses, like skis, were a necessary means of transportation in the early days. A good horse could sell for more money than 10 cows. Breeding quick, agile horses that could match the zigzag movements of cattle became a profitable sideline for Yampa Valley ranchers.
Coke Roberts started this quarter horse breed. Cy Dawson, him and Cy worked together quite a lot, and Cy told him he had a horse in Oklahoma that he sure would wished he'd go see. Cy bought Peter McHugh, and Peter McHugh was one of the greatest studs that ever was. Coke had some good maverick mares, you know. He'd breed them to Peter McHugh, and then the offspring of that's what he used for cowpunchers. But that's actually where the Peter McHugh got their stamina, was from them Mustangs. That's been a long time ago.
In fact, Routt County is referred to as the cradle of the quarter horse. There always seemed to be someone around with a new scheme to revive the valley's economy. This time the idea was to remake Steamboat Springs into a world-class spa and resort. Gloria Gossard recalls her dad's efforts.
My dad envisioned it as becoming one of the great spas of America. In that age, that era back there, spas were a big, big thing. And since we had such a marvelous diversity and variety of springs, really a spring to suit almost everyone's taste.
Modern Winter Olympic Games began in 1924, but it would be 8 years before Howelson Hill ski jumpers could afford to get there.
24, yeah, I was selected then. Well, they said if we could pay our fare to New York, they'd take care of us. Well, we couldn't rake up enough money to get to New York, so that was gone. In 28, well, the same deal. Couldn't get enough funds to send skiers over there.
My name is John Steele, and I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I came to Steamboat Springs in 1918 and I started skiing at the age of 9. And I completed 40 years of skiing in the competition jumping. I also broke many records, hill records, as I went along, which got me into the top notch. I was a member of the 1932 Olympic jumping team, and I also made the 36 jumping team, but we couldn't afford to send us from here to New York to send us over there.
Steamboat's most famous ski family faced hardships that would have stopped other kids in their tracks.
When the kids were growing up,
no money.
There was no money to do anything, and everybody skied, you know, and that was just the thing for them to do. And they all three worked all summer. Just the minute school was out, they had a job. Loris picked strawberries for Mrs. Homer. Skeeter worked in Furlong's hardware store, and Buddy went out and worked for Grandpa Warner. And they never spent their money. They saved every penny of it for winter.
An electrician and skier from Vernal, Utah, had a bright idea that the Winter Sports Club could not refuse.
Oh, that thing weighed over 100 pounds then. And that was without the fireworks. If anybody remembers what a lead storage battery was like in those days, they were heavy. I got up there with the thing, turned it on, started down the hill. The first thing that happened, the first turn, I stuck that storage battery, flew out of the pack. Somehow miraculously recovered that thing, skied the rest of the hill down with holding on to it. And the ski pole sticking out. Got down, boy, they thought that was the greatest thing on earth. They didn't know about the battery coming out. They thought that was part of it, I guess.
Skiing had become so much a part of Steamboat Springs, the school district was the first in the U.S. to make the sport a part of the curriculum.
Dad had a program where all the kids from the very early age clear up through high school had skiing as a part of their curriculum if they chose, and could come to Holliston after school and learn to ski.
Mr. Wegeman was a wonderful teacher. He gave us all the basics.
Dad was the only instructor back at those days, and then he used me and he used other kids who were a little more advanced and had more advanced technique to help with some of the beginners.
You just know when school's in session in the good old winter time. Skis tell you. The swings will have to wait until spring. Everything outside is snowed under. And inside, the kids are snowed under with the 3 R's, but not entirely. 2 of the boys are dreaming about the carnival, Dick Richards and his chum, Jer Elliott. Jer's mind is not on his lessons. Saved by the Bell. School is out, the book learning part of school anyway. Now come the after-school activities. Learning to ski is as much a part of the curriculum as reading, writing, and arithmetic. Teacher doubles in brass, imparting mental gymnastics inside and then putting young sprouts through a course of physical gymnastics outside. I'll give you one guess which part of the curriculum the kids like best. Muscle tone is as important to a student outside as is the mental tone stimulated inside by algebra or spelling. And skis, properly waxed, are as important as pencils properly sharpened and a well-cleaned blackboard. A well-rounded student knows that proper tools are needed for every task. And the task ahead is a happy one. Future voters of Ski Town vote unanimously for school days and the AB skis.
Passenger service on the railroad had made tourism an important part of the economy.
You know, the railroad did a lot of promoting. You know, they were maybe the early Chamber of Commerce did the marketing but they marketed the whole Yampa Valley, not necessarily just Steamboat Springs.
The town suffered a major setback when the Cabin Hotel caught fire in 1939. Just about the time Steamboat Springs was getting back on its feet, along comes the Second World War. Several of the valley's native sons served in the Army's highly decorated 10th Mountain Division. After the war, ski veterans hastily built a ski lift from the base of Howelson Hill to the top of Emerald Mountain. It was, for a brief period of time, the longest single-span chairlift in North America.
The justification for the claim, world's longest single span, was an effort to one-up Aspen.
Oh, the ski-tow has certainly done the trick to make us forget all those words, like climbers and herringbone and clister, that climbing is sure for the birds.
Track!
Bend your knees.
$5, please.
The skiers must be a resourceful bunch if they're going to tour upper slopes. If the snow snakes don't bite through their longies, an avalanche will bury those dopes. Walla, 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 walla. Here's to the trail on the mountaintop, and here's to the skier who dares. But give me my skis and some waxes to drive away all of my cares, to drive away all of my cares, my cares, my cares, my cares.
When the square dance craze arrived, Steamboat Springs was not about to be outdone.
They used to square dance here at country dances, but they had gotten away from it through the years. We had 4 different square dance clubs here at one time, maybe 40 or 50 people in each club, and it was a big thing. We had square dances in the streets in August. For
a festival, weekend festival.
Yeah,
that
weekend
came from
festival.
all over the country.
And it closed Highway 40 and danced in the street.
Walk, boys. Walk, girls. Promenade 2 steps. Run, girls. Go. Walk, boys. Walk, girls. You're on your own. Go.
Returning from the '48 Olympics, Gordy Wren became the only American to qualify in all 4 Winter Olympic ski events.
He did something to people. He did something to this town that you're talking about, Ski Town, USA. I really think that Gordy has to be credited with making the Ski Town USA.
A favorite story of Gordy's was how he lost his Olympic parade uniform.
I had the ski school at Winter Park, and I would come back here to Steamboat to visit my grandparents and my relations. And I had my Saks Fifth Avenue Olympic marching uniform. It needed cleaning, so I left it at my grandmother's house and told her to have it cleaned. Well, it so happened that I had a great uncle. He died, and they sent his clothes to the cleaners too. Well, my clothes got finished first and got delivered at my grandmother Wren's house before my Uncle George's old suit of clothes. My Aunt Florence went down to the mortuary and she dressed my Uncle George, I guess. And when I got back home a couple of weekends later, did my Olympic uniform come back? And my Aunt Florence says, what color? And I said, well, the pants were gray and the suit was kind of a navy blue with brass. Oh, she said, I thought those pants were awfully short on your Uncle George. Well, they buried my Uncle George in my Olympic uniform, which is okay. He was a practical joker, and I'm sure that he got a big charge out of that.
2 private schools would play a role in the town's diversity. The Lowell Whiteman School in Strawberry Park and the Yampa Valley College, now Colorado Mountain College, Alpine campus. Another ideas man would come along in the 1950s, but this time his idea was solid and would change the Yampa Valley and the town of Steamboat Springs forever.
Early on, I decided, I think in the early 50s, that I was going to investigate that mountain and
see how feasible it really was. In the wintertime, we took several snowcat trips across from the top of Rabbit Ears Pass. They worked pretty good. We got into the top of Storm Mountain, about 10 miles across there. We'd ski down then and kept looking at more and more of the mountain to see if there was any big problems, and it mainly looked like a great place to ski.
Yeah, that's where Jim Temple took his snow probe and measured the snow depth that he could measure 12 feet deep, and he hit bottom twice, and that was 11 feet deep.
My brother and I struggled with the cattle business, and we're gradually going down the drain financially, and that is about the time when, with Jim Temple, Marvin Crawford, and Jerry Groswell, we decided to form what was then called the Storm Mountain Ski Corporation.
The first lift was a Poma lift, 2,200 feet long, and went up Cub Claw, which was at the base of Bear Claw, which I guess now is called Christie. We opened in, it must have been the winter of 1960, in the old farmhouse at the base of the mountain, and sold lift tickets, I think, for $2 for adults. Kids were $1, I think. We had a little restaurant in the old house and a place to get warm, and I had an old Oliver wide track tractor that we packed all the trails with.
Progress was slow and plagued by a shortage of money.
I can remember splicing the cable on Christmas Eve, '62. Buddy Werner was there to help us. We worked all night long because the cable splicer had to get back.
We had 5 of us took turns running the lift, and we didn't even bother with the top attendant. We just said, if you don't get off, you'll come back down. And some did.
Anticipating an influx of thirsty tourists, the bowling alley out on Highway 40 past the Pine Grove Barn was bought and remodeled into a nightclub.
It had been originally a 10-lane bowling alley, and we used the whole building.
All you have to do is say 2 words about the cave-in. If anybody even knew cave-in, they always remember the other 2 words better. It was called the pillow room.
The pillow room, which was a room where there were just large pillows and very low tables, and I do remember coming in and opening up at 10 o'clock in the morning to clean and finding people still there. So, I mean, you know, you can put whatever story you want to that.
Aerospace giant LTV, based in Dallas, purchased the Mount Werner Ski Corporation in 1969. They had deep pockets and big plans for the mountain.
Yep, Steamboat's an exciting place. Let me show you some of the plans for the future. As you can see, we got a beautiful bell gondola already in. The 8-story Steamboat Village Inn will be up by the time you see this film, along with the shopping mall. And over 100 condominiums this year alone. And for you fellers who like developing things, this land up here'd be a beautiful spot for a few new condominiums.
Steamboat became a full-fledged winter ski resort, but who would stay in all those new beds in the summer? The community challenge was to offer a variety of activities that would attract summer visitors.
LTV come in here and bought Ski Mountain, and I thought it was they would develop it and make it a summer resort, and so I come here in '71 to start a stable here, and it has been good. That was big money coming in, and it was going to, you know, kind of boom.
But you know, friends, it's what we're not doing that's the big news. We're not taking away from what Steamboat has always been. The Old West and Ski Town, USA, wrapped into one. It's coming, friend. It's coming fast.
It's a-comin', steamboats a-comin'.
Routt County Commissioner and Town Veterinary Doc Utterback saw it coming all right.
this deluge of parasitic progress, I call it parasitic progress, began to show up in the county because the commercial money changers and the rogues from the metropolitan areas come over here and saw this valley, and they said, "Ooh, man, look at here, look what we got here, a plum patch, and the plums all ready to be picked." And that started the invasion and the degradation of the customs, culture, and the stability of the county, because the locals lost control. They was more interested in making a few fast bucks than they were maintaining the lifestyle that had supported them down through the last 50 years, see.
Well, I can't blame them, I guess. I mean, if they like money better than they like the place, we happen to like the place better than we did the money. So that's the difference.
Steamboat's western image was the envy of every other ski resort in the West. Sombrero Stable gladly supplied horses, wagons, and cowboys for 20 years worth of steamboat marketing, including Steamboat's most enduring image.
I used to go to LTV down to the board meetings all the time because we had to go down and present our marketing program and our financial program and everything. We were sitting around introducing that year's campaign, which included the barn poster. Now we had just under construction on the then Steamboat Village Inn, which is now the Sheraton. So I pulled the poster out as my final biggie because I felt real good about it. I thought this is going to be good. One of the guys sitting at the board says, "Wait, is that the new Steamboat Village Inn?" Harry was looking at the barn posters.
A funny thing, when we got here, all of the drawings and all of the plans for the ski areas were in John Fetcher's briefcase. All of the financial records was in Mix Beauvais' trunk of his car.
LTV hired America's first Olympic silver medalist in alpine skiing.
Billy Kidd of the United States. Billy from Stowe, Vermont, 20 years old. The kid from Vermont, skiing through the snow near Innsbruck, Austria. Leader so far is Michel Arpin, France. Remember, the time Billy must have to take the lead at this moment is 1:01.94. So we'll watch the clock.
The good finish, good finish.
And he did it. The temporary leader, at least at the moment, is Billy Kidd of the United States. No Americans ever won a medal. Here's his time, 60.31.
His approachable manner and boundless enthusiasm for the sport of skiing opened lots of doors for Steamboat.
Good morning, everyone. It's today, Thursday, December 22nd, and you're looking at videotape scenes of Steamboat Springs, Colorado. The skier that you saw at the opening, by the way, is a young man by the name of Billy Kidd, one of the best-known skiers in this country and the world, for that matter. Later in this hour, I'll be skiing with Billy Kidd. He's a former Olympic silver medalist, a former amateur and world professional champion, and I take him on head-to-head in a downhill slalom race.
Billy, his hard skis and Stetson hat redefined Ski Town, USA.
Steamboat Ski Area is ready, set, and raring to go November 23rd. Come on over for the ride of your life. Steamboat.
The Steamboat had finally arrived. During the 79-80 ski season, 243,000 skier days were tallied on Mount Werner. By 1990, over 1 million skier days were logged. Increased tax revenues brought new schools, stoplights, suburbs, timeshares, and strip malls. It also created the biggest real estate boom since the Homestead Act.
And really, the real estate market has been on the rise ever since 1985. It's been an incredible run, and really in contrast to the early days, which were boom and bust.
A constant stream of new people has changed the perceptions of the place.
in the spring of the year, instead of calling it mud season, we called it calving time. It was because of a time of rebirth. You see, new things are born, calving time. It was a hard time of work, and people that were in town, as well as people that were on the ranches, were involved in this rebirth of things. You had a feeling that the newness was coming. Now we call it the mud season, and we get the hell out because it's not a place to live and unfit for us from now. The tourist dollar's not here for winter, and it's not going to be here until summer, so we just will go someplace else and hide out. And so they do.
Vernon Summer, living on a ranch that's been in his family for over 100 years, has his own views.
Well, the only thing we know, it's going to keep changing. And I liked it the way it was, but it's bringing an awful lot of interested and talented people here, so it's not all bad.
I did a radio ad one winter. Because of its popularity, I did the same ad every winter, unchanged, for 8 years, Smokey. If you love skiing, one day it will happen to you. You'll roll out of bed early in the morning, peek through the curtains, and there it is. Powder. Well, all right. It snowed all night. The snow is deep and the snow is light. For the best in downhill and cross-country ski equipment and clothing, take it to the edge. Take it to the inside edge. Inside Edge Sports in downtown Steamboat Springs.
Dance on this earth, yeah. We were meant to dance on this earth, yeah. We were meant to dance on this earth, yeah. Not crawl, not crawl.
At the beginning of a new millennium, Steamboat has managed to keep many of its institutions intact, and even added a few new ones like Strings in the Mountains, an arts council, and a community orchestra. It's a sure bet that the next 100 years will be as colorful as the first.
Called the Tread of Pioneers. The year was 1900, and a time of simple things. Neighbor helping neighbor in the town of Steamboat Springs. It was the year they lit up Lincoln. Now the people had the power to see a brighter future at this special hour. This little northwest Colorado town at the dawn of a century. Ranchers, miners, and merchants showing prosperity. In the town of Steamboat Springs, the arrival of the railroad, hauling cattle, hauling coal, bringing passengers, seeking healing waters for the soul. The community now could see the sign of tourist trade and welcoming the travelers and the difference that they made. Then the people of Routt County vote to move the county seat in 1912. was fun for all, bringing a bit of Norway and the winter carnival. I hear the tread of pioneers, of nations yet to be. The first low wash of waves, where soon will roll a human sea. Enter the roaring 20s and a brand new courthouse too, where you can drive and buy an automobile on Lincoln Avenue. Many a weary miner, after digging yards of coal, would join those crazy